Welcome to the Podyssey Pod. This is a live recording. If you're watching on the replay on YouTube, make sure you hit that subscribe button. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, hit that subscribe, follow button, and make sure you leave a 5-star review. If you're just itching to give a 1-star review, just hit me up first. I don't know why you need to do that. Don't be so busy. Just 5 stars only. Let's lift each other up. Joining me today for this inaugural episode is Jessi Freitag. Jessi and I got connected in the startup CPG community, where she hosted their podcast, got it to hundreds of thousands of downloads. And now you're working with other operators, working with other people in Notion, fractional CPG consultant, and just general project management support. You have over 10 years of experience. And we're going to be talking a little bit about that today for other podcasters, how some of the things that we both found out through automation, making our lives a little bit easier. So Jessi, welcome to the Podyssey Pod.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here, Lucas. Thank you for the wonderful introduction. And it's been so great we connected through LinkedIn and have been in touch for, I think, a few years now. And so it's really fun to get to do a show together. And I love talking podcast automation and any tips I can share to make people's lives easier. So very excited to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really, really excited to have you. I've been doing this a while, but I know there's always something to learn. And I think that even for my own knowledge of what I can do to get a little bit more yield out of this, that's one of my favorite phrases. I know that some people call it high mileage content, but for me, I like high yield content. And I really want to make sure that from this one recording that I'm getting the most out of it. So in order to do that, I need to automate. I need to be doing less work to accomplish more, because I'm constantly manually trying to trim things up. It's never going to really work out. So let's talk about that a little bit. Let's just talk about sort of, before we even get into automation, let's just talk about what it takes to make a podcast, because I think there are a lot of misconceptions. In some ways, it's easier than a lot of people think, and in a lot of ways, it's more difficult than people think. So let's just talk about what I had to do to get you onto this podcast. So obviously, I reached out there. We put together some show notes. We talked about our topics ahead of time. We made sure that we had enough content. We set up our recording studio, which in this case, it's Crowdcast. A lot of people still record on Zoom. I think Smartless for the longest time, they probably recorded locally, but they were using Zoom. And that's the number one podcast in the world. You don't need to go fancy.
Yeah.
Some people use Riverside. I'm a big Zencaster fan myself. There are other tools like Squadcast, etc. So you have to have somewhere to record. You need to edit it up. You need to publish it so it goes live to the channels. So Apple, Spotify, YouTube. You need to promote it. You need to share it. And then you need to do it all over again. So really leveraging that. Obviously, that's a quick version. But Jessi, what did I miss on what it takes to, from just how you came here today? What am I missing? And it's fair game. You can roast me if there's something I could have done better. If there's anything I missed, let me know. That's why we're live. It's going to get edited out in the replay version. You're still hearing this on the replay.
Well, one point that I want to emphasize in that list that you just mentioned is the scheduling part. I feel like scheduling in our case, we had a pretty easy time scheduling this recording, but depending on the guest, sometimes the scheduling portion can be so many back and forth emails, or something comes up last minute and the person needs to reschedule. And it can become really onerous, the back and forth of the scheduling. So I just want to emphasize that part. I think sometimes people underestimate the back and forth, and we'll talk about some tools that make that easier with Calendly or other calendar tools that can take some of the brunt of the force out of that. But the scheduling part is not to be underestimated, and just planning for things to come up. People needing to cancel last minute because daycare is closed that day, or whatever is going to happen.
Even you're feeling sick, you have to come and talk.
Yeah.
You have to be on camera. You want to be looking your best, at least feeling like you're looking your best. If you're super sick, if you're coughing all the time, nobody wants to really hear. Nobody wants to see me cough. I'm sorry for all the viewers just now, but I think that's huge. And another thing too is this is only virtual. If you're talking about an in-person studio, there's just lots more at stake. It's a lot more expensive, there's way more headaches. I think that the other thing too is, depending on your guest, you might be booking through assistants. If you have multiple guests on, it's just all of that coordination of schedules. So that's really, I think that could be a future topic, is just scheduling and booking guests.
For
But
sure.
to your point, it can't be underestimated just how difficult it is.
Yeah, I'd also just add a few other pieces would be creating, if depending on if you want to create custom artwork or images for, for your show, whether you're going to do that in Canva or another tool, like getting headshots from your guests, getting the bio, collecting guest information. You touched on that a little bit, but that's also an area that can be a lot of back and forth if you can capture, what we can talk about forms or other ways to capture those pieces, but getting all the info you need to be able to write the show notes or prep for the show also in there, just on your side as the host. And when I've been in the host seat, the prep that I'll do on a guest, of maybe I'll listen to a podcast that they've been on recently, or maybe I'll read up on them, and trying to make that as streamlined as possible. Cause you can end up, you can over prep or end up under prepping because you don't have enough time. And so that's the preparation as the host for your guest also is an important piece. And I have some tips on that as well to try to make that less stressful.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to dig into that and how you do that prep, because I find that it can be a balance between an over manicured guy that has all their PR talking points, they send you a ton of stuff, versus someone who's never done anything. And it's sometimes
Yeah.
those really manicured guests are great for driving audience. Sometimes it's less than you think, and sometimes you get someone who isn't that well known, but they have just so much knowledge, and finding that balance. So I think that is something that's takes a lot of time. Also, we kind of did it before, but getting headshots is so difficult. You'd be amazed at how many people don't have a good headshot, or it's like super dark, so it's hard to crop and edit.
Yeah.
One of my favorite things is do some poses during your recording, ideally at the start, so you're kind of getting aligned. I call it a temperature alignment, where I'm a host, I'm excited, I love doing this, I'm coming in hot, I'm yelling, I'm talking fast. As a guest, it can be a little bit intimidating if you've never done it before. So sometimes as a host, your temperature is way up here and your guest is down here. You want to bring it together so the energy levels match. One activity that I like is just doing some thumbnail poses, which is literally as simple as this. And if you're listening to the audio feed, I'm just making funny faces. And then you can crop it out. It's in HD. It matches it. So tell me a little bit about that prep. I'd love to hear just how you do it, because I've always been impressed by how prepared you've come into episodes, Jessi.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. And I'm going to specifically shout out a certain tool for this that I started using probably about a year ago. But generally, if I'm prepping for a guest, I'm going through looking for if they've been on a podcast before, recent podcast episodes, any articles they've written, anything they've been mentioned in, just kind of full like social media stalking, like where have they been? What are they up to? Because I want to grab questions from that of, oh, that's really interesting, you did that, or something from their past that we can, call back to. But there's a tool that I love called SnipD. It's SnipD. And it's a podcast player where basically you can search for, it's like any other podcast player. You search for guest episodes, whatever, but you can snip moments of it. So like for me, I enjoy walking, or like, if I'm in the car, that's when I'll listen to podcasts or audio to prep for guests sometimes. And you can like set it up to either have it be a headphone tap or pressing pause or whatever it is that it captures a snip. And so as I'm listening, I'll be like, oh, that's such a great quote that they just said, or that's such a great like callback. When I interview them, I want to ask how that relates to what they're doing now, or something like that. And I'll take all these snips essentially by tapping my headphones, and I can be driving, I can be walking, I can be multitasking. And then at the end of the week, it will email me a summary of, hey, here's the episodes you listened to. Here's all the quotes and call outs of what you listened to. And it actually will even send it to Notion as well automatically. They have a link with Notion, so you can have it send to a guest prep table right in Notion. And then I can look at all my pieces of like, oh, here's all the little call outs that I had when I listened to prep. And then I can put those right into my run of show. So I really love that tool for prepping, because I can be on the go and consuming content about a guest.
Yeah, I love that. And that's such a huge tool. I'm always shocked at how little prep a lot of hosts do. Both as like when I've been a guest, I think there's one podcast that's really blown me away. And just doing a quick search for the guest name plus various social media accounts, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, you kind of get a good mix of who they are. But then also for the research, I'll just put their name into Spotify and just see what else they've come up on. And I do this for another reason, is so that I'm not asking the same questions that they
Yes.
constantly get asked, right?
Yeah.
So that's another just way that I like to prep. Let's let's kind of shift into that now that we've kind of gone through that entire process. The one thing that we didn't touch on is just reminders for people. So always that for me, filling out those show notes together is pretty key. I do a Google Doc. It's simple. Everyone has access to it if they need to share it with an assistant or someone. But that also tells me how prepared they're coming in. If they don't really add too much, then is it going to be a good episode? But if we've been going back and forth on it, I know that it's top of mind for them. B, I know they're going to show up. C, I know that they've actually paid some attention to it. So for me, that's one way to remind. We can also do sort of, hey, we're recording tomorrow. But for the reminders and topics, I do like to be a little bit more manual because it is sort of that one off. Let's talk about sort of automation light. So you mentioned SnipD. What are some of the tools that you use just kind of out of the box for that? I'll share some of mine, but I'd love to hear some of yours first.
Yeah, I think I mentioned already Calendly, and I'm a massive Calendly fan. I'm not paid for or sponsored by them in any way. I'm just a massive Calendly fan. There are other calendar tools that do the same thing, right? But the main function is that, and the important part is I see a lot of people make this mistake, and I've made this mistake myself. I set up a Calendly. I don't really put a lot of time into the settings of it, and I just start sending the link, and then pretty soon people are booking meetings with me the next day at 5 p.m. and I'm like, wait, what? Like, and then you turn it off and you're like, oh, Calendly doesn't work. I hate it. And the main thing there is to really take the time to set up, even if you just the free version of Calendly, set up the hours that you want to be recording podcasts between. If it's just one day a week that you record, be available that 1 hour a week. Set that up in Calendly. Set up, that when they book a meeting, it redirects to, a form where they fill out information about themselves. Have buffer time between other meetings if you're opening up your calendar a little bit, but really honing the different pieces, like how far in advance can they book, what times of day, how many recordings can you do in a day? You don't want to have it just be open and you end up recording 5 episodes in a day. You'll be exhausted. So I think those pieces are really important if you're going to use a tool like Calendly, but I find it just so helpful. Even just the fact that people can reschedule directly, because again, if something comes up, they can reschedule, and then I just get a notification that the guest rescheduled. I find that super helpful. I also have used, obviously I love Notion as someone that, educates and tutors in Notion, but you can use Notion as a paid tool. So you can use a basic Google Sheet for free and set up, it's kind of automation light, but whether it's responses from your Google form going into a Google Sheet, or just having your Google Sheet have all the tasks you need to do for your episode in one place, so that you don't have to bop around to other places of like, wait, did I post it on, here's my social to-do list, here's my prep to-do list, have it all in one place, or, linking your run of show Google Doc into your Google Sheet. And so all your like run of shows are in one place. Those are some really like very light duty things of just getting everything in one place. And then, I'm happy to expand on Zapier as a topic, but I think the free version of Zapier also is super powerful, from getting information from forms to places, from, when your episode is live. Like, one simple thing I love to do is when the RSS feed goes live, I have an automation set up in Zapier that says, hey, this just went live. It sends the link to my Gmail drafts. It has some like kind of basic functions of like, hello, your episode is live. And then I like to write a custom thank you note to every guest that, I have on a show, but at least the bones of it are there, right? Of course I'm going to say hello.
Yeah.
Of course I'm going to include
say,
a link.
Here's a link. Thanks for coming on. But yeah, if you're doing a weekly show, it's 52 times a year that you say, hey, thanks so much. I really enjoyed talking about these topics. By the way, here's a little clip if you wanted to share. You mentioned Calendly, and I just want to touch on one thing that I've found is that the most successful hosts do is they have one day a week that they record. Yeah. And in that sense of, hey, you know what? If you can't make this Wednesday, I'm sure within the next 3 months, you'll have a Wednesday where you can record. And if not, then we can really streamline, we can figure something more custom. So I think that it's just kind of a key takeaway of, if nothing else, when setting up your automations, a very one-on-one level, at a very one-on-one level, make sure that you're not over automating it, because you're just going to be dumping problems into your lap. Figure out sort of what's the least amount that I can do here, and that's 1 day a week that you can book on with my calendar link.
Yes,
Not
absolutely.
opening it up to be all the time, so you have back to back to back recordings. It's exhausting. I'm incredibly extroverted, but whenever I record, there's a reason that I stepped back into producing for the last year, is that you have to turn up your personality. It can be exhausting being in front of the camera. So you really hit on some good points there. An app that I like to use is my email app, Superhuman, where I have a bunch of kind of canned responses where I can just go in and say, hey, your episode is now live. Here's the link. Or even for guest outreach. Hey, would love to have you on. Here are some details about the show. Really spelling it out for the guest, why they should care, why they should come on, and what's in it for them. Hit them with a whiff 'em. Okay, you want me to come on your podcast. What's in it for me? Are you just leveraging my audience to grow yours? Do you have an audience I always laugh at this at the saying, but that I can expose myself to. I got to figure out a better way to phrase that. But what's in it for me as a guest? So I think that there's a lot of great tools out of the box to get started with automation, even to your point of just a simple Google Sheet and doing some basic automations. AI has done a lot in the last year. And the reason that I'm so keen on Google Sheets is that everyone has access to it. So sort of like we were talking about in the previous segment, that I would say everyone has access to it. Everyone can open a Google Doc, have a Google Sheet, although sometimes they might be a little bit more Microsoft based, but generally speaking, they can access a Google Sheet. Not everyone's on Notion, not everyone is on Airtable. So you have to make sure that it is very public facing and guest friendly as well.
Yeah. And I would know, if for anyone who is really keen on Notion and as someone that loves Notion, you can essentially set up Notion to be like a Google Doc. There are published settings so that you can have anyone can edit it, and it acts basically just like a public Google Doc. But that's just something that, you'd want to make sure you have the Notion skills to be able to set that up in a way that a guest can interact with. But as far as baseline, what everyone's familiar with, I think Google Sheets, like you said, Google Docs, everyone knows them, has access to them, is familiar with them. And so that makes them so great for collaborating.
Of course, this is presented by Podyssey, which is the podcast production company that I co-founded with Husky Media. We've been working together for the last few years. And the number one question that I always get is, Lucas, can you help me with my podcast? Yes, I can. Well, not me personally, but my team of editors, sound engineers, designers can. So if you are interested in having us produce your podcast, visit podyssey.io. I'm sure there will be links splattered all over the place here. And now back to our show. Let's get into some of those heavy automations, because I think that even just Notion itself is so incredibly powerful. But let's start with Notion, because I know that a lot of our audience does use Notion. We use it internally, and there's so much you can do there. And then let's start talking about connecting it to other pieces.
Yeah, absolutely. And basically, podcasting was my introduction to Notion, because I started to use Notion, and then I was using Google Sheets, which again, I love using Google Sheets to track my show. But I was like, once I saw Notion, I was like, I think there's a lot here that could be done. And so my most extensive Notion build ever has been my podcasting setup. And it's because I had so much fun with it, and because of all the possibilities I wanted everything to be able to live in one place, from my calendars of upcoming guests, from all my Google form responses to come into one place, from all my templates for run of shows, for all of my show notes, for all of my ad reads. Like, I wanted everything to live in one workspace. And basically with Notion, you can do that. You can set up different databases, and also the filtering abilities that you have. You can do some filtering in, something like Google Sheets as well. But in Notion, basically I could have one massive database with every episode, every possible episode, every idea of an episode that was being scheduled all in one place, and then have different views of, okay, here's the episodes that are in the next month, and here are my to-do tasks. Here's the ones that, I was on Startup CBG, if it was a brand, I needed to get physical samples of the product usually. So who don't I have physical samples from? And once I had samples, that disappears from that to-do list automatically. Like once I check, yep, samples received, that disappears from my to-do list. Some of those basic filterings and views, setting those up really could hone in that I'd be like, all right, here's who I need to send prep questions to. Here's who I need to send samples to. Here's who hasn't completed their form, to then once the episode is recorded to being able to say, okay, have I, edited this yet? Have I written the show notes? And actually writing everything in Notion as well, rather than, popping over to a different software. I just had templates set up in Notion of, all right, here's my blog post template, write it in here. And then also if you're working on a team that works in Notion, being able to connect databases. So, okay, I need to put this on the rest of the team's, communications calendar. Okay, I'm just going to link these two together. I never even have to leave my workspace to publish it to the marketing team's calendar. Like, how wonderful is that for saving time to not have to send an email and say, hey, so-and-so, the episode's live, it's scheduled for here. Can you make sure to put it on the calendar? No, I can just link them directly and, put it directly on the calendar and have it ready to go. So those are a few examples, and I'm happy to dig into more if there's ones that are particularly of interest, but that's kind of Notion can basically handle all the different pieces of prepping for and publishing a podcast and have it be your one hub and home. And that's why I really love it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to dive into a little bit more of what you said of just sharing with other teams, because I think that's when it gets really underutilized is the host is really excited about the podcast, but what about the marketing team? What about the customer success team? What about the sales team? Can they use that? Tell me a little bit more about working with other teams and how you would divide up that content.
Yeah. So, for example, if you have a blog and you want every podcast episode to, maybe the blog has other content, but maybe the podcast episodes can be blog entries where you have a full transcript available and you have a summary and you have some key call outs. Once the episode is published and you've written your blog post, maybe a copy of the blog post automatically gets posted to the team that's publishing all the other blog posts page, so that they have right in there, oh, look, we can publish a podcast blog this week. Great. That's extra content for us. Or we know once a week, we're going to get a podcast blog. It can go directly to their workspace where they're working on blogs and writing blogs. So that would be, one example on the blog side. And then if you have someone who's managing social media channels, being able to parse out the pieces that they're going to need. So they're going to need the link to the episode. They're going to need the digital assets that either you've created that they're going to create. So they're going to need files, having those right in Notion as well, and being able to publish those over to their workspace or connect those workspaces. So it also shows up in their list of, hey, here's a social media post that's ready to go. It has the link, it has the assets, it has the copy, and all they have to do is post it. That can be super helpful for saving time. And you can basically connect, like I said, with communications calendar. And I've also set up on comms calendars for marketing teams, kind of here's all, you can filter views in Notion where you say, hey, here's all the things that haven't been published. So when someone's like, all right, maybe they're building out the calendar for Instagram, they could have a filter view of, hey, look, here's all the podcast episodes that haven't been featured on social yet. I can set up a template for them so that when they log in to do their job, they see, oh, here's all the podcasts that haven't been posted yet. Here's all the blogs. Here's all the other content. And then they can just click. And then all the content that I already prepped is already linked and there for them. And they don't have to ask me, hey, can you send over the assets for the episode? Or, hey, what's the link I should drive people to? It all lives in one place.
No, absolutely. I love that. I have a follow-up question there, but I'll just ask you now. In terms of sort of that post-launch and the measurement, do you ever do any automation for pulling in all that data from the different sources of where that podcast lives in terms of the overall reach of an episode? So obviously you have your audio downloads, your YouTube views, but as you get the social clips, the email performance, the blog performance, do you automate any of that data aggregation?
I haven't automated that, but that'd be pretty simple to set up. That's a really great idea. I think you could build a dashboard or a table that rolled in all of that. That'd be really awesome. I love that idea.
Yeah. Yeah, no, maybe that's the future of Podyssey.
Yeah.
So let's talk about sort of the ultimate ideal situation. So you start with your guest booking, your ideation. Walk me through everything that's connected there from, I guess, from Calendly to follow up email.
Yeah, yeah. So basically, if I'm reaching out to someone, I would kind of have like you, Lucas, I have a little bit of a template of, here's why I'd love to have you on the show. And then I add some personal pieces of why I'm interested in that guest. But I start with kind of a baseline template that has the hellos and the thank yous, and here's a link to learn more about the show. So starting with some templates and then filling that out, then having them complete the Calendly link. So they sign up in Calendly, they get a calendar invite that goes straight to their calendar. They accept it. It redirects them to a Google form to fill out their information of, from their name, pronouns, any information that I'm going to need to know. Their headshot uploads directly right there. In the case where I was shipping samples, it had an address to ship samples to all in one place. They complete the Google form. That goes straight to my Notion. And then I also had, I'm a paid Calendly user because, again, I love Calendly. So you can set up, heavier duty automation would be to use paid Calendly, where you have workflows set up of, I would have a couple days before the show. It would just remind them, hey, don't forget your podcast episode's coming out. And also it would send them a generic, like, here are some best practices for prepping your room for being in a podcast. Generally, I'm also going to send them a reminder email that has their particular run of show and ask them for feedback about the episode. I love your idea, Lucas, about doing the Google Doc and working on it together. Generally, I've prepped it in Notion and kind of sent them a draft, and we've done some feedback. So there's some room for that to be streamlined. But basically, I liked that Calendly would kind of remind them always a certain number of days before, here's how to prep your room, here's, make sure you wear headphones, those pieces. And then I would reply to that email and say, hey, and here's the particular notes for your episode.
Guest prep is one of the hardest things of,
yes,
like, we're both in a good studio. I've got my headphone in. I'm using a single AirPod that I've connected, but you'd be amazed at how many people just don't have headphones. And we're talking about all of these advanced concepts, but sometimes, more often than not, it's the little things of making sure that the guest is prepped. And you want your guests to look and sound as great as they can. Going back to what's in it for them, it's a platform for them to look and sound great.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, that's why I like that reminder is separate of prepping their room, because it's just so important. And then they can send me questions, because often they'd reply to that email and be like, do I really need headphones? And I'd be like, should I go upstairs and dig mine out? And I'm like, yes, please dig out your headphones. Because again, I want you to look and sound great, because the goal is to highlight the guest. So that was an important piece. And then, once we recorded, we'd record the episode on one of the platforms. And then from there, I would essentially mark in Notion, like, this has been recorded. And then I start my editing workflow, and that's all done. I use Adobe Audition, but I'd be doing that, offline, not automation. And then once it's time to publish, then, a couple automations that were set up of, I didn't used to record video. I haven't historically done video podcasts. I love that this is video, but I was using Transistor as my podcast feed, and they had an automation that would automatically convert the audio of the episode into a YouTube video and publish it to the YouTube channel. And when you don't have video, that's really nice, because it still gets it on YouTube and people can still listen to it in the background if they're on YouTube. So that was
a lot of people listen to podcasts on YouTube. They throw it on, and there's something about riding up in that algorithm as well, of just people are searching for, in your case, CPG podcasts, and just showing up there.
Yeah, I was amazed once I set up that automation, because I was like, well, it's here, I might as well. Doesn't cost me any time. And yeah, there was significant numbers of views and downloads that came from YouTube. And I was like, okay, cool, awesome, excellent automation. And then I also had, I was using Canva to, I've used Canva to create assets. I also really like Adobe Express. If you already own the Adobe suite, it's like Adobe's version of Canva that's part of the Adobe suite now. But basically in Canva, I could link directly like my Google form where they uploaded their headshot. That's a specific folder. I could have Canva link to that specific folder so that when I open Canva, it's like, here's all your recent guest assets. And that was awesome because I wasn't having to like go download them from Google and like upload them into Canva. I just linked Canva and that Google form directly to each other. So my headshots are just right there to create the art. That was also something that I found super helpful. It saves a few minutes, but over and over when you're publishing, hundreds of episodes, that extra time dragging things around your screen, it all adds up.
It does. It's all those mundane tasks, and that's what it's about. Is every little piece you can automate. You're doing it 50 times a year, maybe more. Taking it and then just really, really scaling it up. So I super appreciate all of that, Jessi. Again, if anyone wants to get in touch with you, you're on LinkedIn. I don't think that there's been a ton of activity in the chat. So unless you have anything else that you want to add, any questions that you got here, I did have a couple just about really getting that content and communicating with any other teams. I think that we should wrap it up. We're in that sweet 35-minute spot, which I'm always telling other podcast hosts to stay within. It's always better to save some for the next episode. Jessi, is there anything else that you want to touch on automation-wise when it comes to your podcast production?
Yeah, two last tools that I'll just mention. One is that I really recommend using a password tool. I know that sounds maybe silly or doesn't make sense when you're talking about podcast automation, but like having your passwords all in one place in a tool and not in a Google Sheet because there's security issues there, but just using a password tool so that every time you're trying to log into one of your podcast tools, you don't have to go look up the password or you don't have to remember your password. Just using a password tool for all the different pieces of necessary to publish a podcast, I think saves a lot of time. The second one is just, I think that using something like Loom to document your podcast processes, or even, Scribe is another tool that I like, something to document your podcast process. Even if you work just totally on your own workflow, at some point it's valuable to write down all the steps that you go through, or even record a video of yourself talking through the steps. That may seem really silly, but you will find like, I wonder why I do that. Or maybe you have to take a break or have to take a break from podcasting. Then you have a recording of yourself to go back to and be like, wait, how did I do that? Your past self is here to tell you now. So I just, don't underestimate the power of documenting your process. Take 5 minutes to record a video of yourself of all your different podcast pieces. It's good self-reflection and it's just good, it's good to have if you ever need to go back. So I find that super valuable. But yeah, feel free. People are welcome to ask me any questions on LinkedIn or reach out if they have anything specific they want to dig into. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Love that. Thank you so much, Jessi. And again, if you're listening to the replay on Apple or Spotify, make sure you're subscribed. If you're watching on YouTube, also hit that smash that subscribe button, leave a comment down below, hit that share button, share with everyone you know, including your mother-in-law, and we'll be back soon with another live podcast recording.